on the data, or to a large extent, we are influenced by what we read or what we see on social media, and that obviously creates panic, it creates paranoia, it creates fear, it creates apprehension, and over again, when we talk about kidnapping and one of the biggest problems is the kidnapping of children. And this obviously strikes a lot of fear into people, into South Africans, into parents, and into families. And this morning we're joined by Lizette Lancaster, who is Crime Hub Manager at the Institute for Security Studies. Lizette, good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and to your listeners. Thanks for having me.
Lizette, when we're talking about crime in general, or even when we're looking at this particular instance, looking at kidnapping in South Africa, and many of us are influenced to a large extent by social media, and not relying as far as official data or statistics that are being released. And this is the reason why we are talking this morning, looking at reliance on social media, because as a form of an alternative media, I think people generally follow social media so much these days that whatever gets posted, whether it is genuine, whether it is fake news, but it certainly does create a lot of panic. It creates paranoia and a lot of fear, and especially when we're talking about kidnapping of children.
Yes, of course. I mean, I don't think a single family in this country that does not worry about their children and their children's safety. So it's understandable. But what we are calling for is a bit of calm and rationality when it comes to the posts on social media. It became so bad in recent months that the police actually had to release a statement saying that a lot of the cases that are brought to them or that has been posted on social media that they had to look at were actually either old cases that, have been resolved from previous times or have been completely fake news. And this is problematic because, number one, it spreads as well, stories. People are looking for kids that are not missing. And furthermore, police resources are allocated in places where it shouldn't be. We desperately need the police to focus on actual crimes in high crime areas that also drive very many of these kidnappings. So it is super important. I mean, and it's not just South Africa. We see this worldwide. I mean, not even going to get into the comments of, conspiracies and QAnon and all these things where people are just buying into this whole idea of human trafficking and kidnapping being, rife. I mean, we're not saying it's not, but we are saying follow the correct information. Make sure that the cases that you hear about, that people are talking about, are the correct cases, and make sure that we have rational ways of keeping our children safe. It doesn't help to get everybody up in arms and demand stuff from the police where, it might be a case that's not even valid.
Exactly. And I think this is a key issue here. And I think you raise a very, very important point, Lizette, in terms of whether the case has merit or it doesn't have merit. Because on the one hand, we look at the term kidnapping, and sometimes it is used very, very loosely.
Yes.
Because there is a difference. There is a difference between kidnapping, abduction, and also when one looks at some of the investigation and the statistics that the South African Police Service has obviously given out, and looking at and investigating those in detail, to obviously identify whether there have been genuine cases of kidnapping or not.
Exactly. I mean, there are lots of stories. If you Google kidnapping, you'll see there is this whole idea that every 5 hours a child gets kidnapped. And that was found to be untrue. Often kids, go out with their friends to report them, and then, of course, they are not. It's not substantiated. They're not actually kidnapped. they've just done stuff and without telling their parents. Abduction is also very related to teenagers going off with their boyfriends, and or kutwala, the type of marriage stuff where underage kids are doing, getting married or having sexual relations without the consent of the parents. So that's a very different story to actual cases of kidnapping. And I think although kids do get kidnapped, although 27% of the cases where the police could confirm a motive, we saw some sexual offences accompanying the kidnapping. It is very difficult to establish how many of them are children, and especially young children are mostly kidnapped by their own parents, in legal disputes over custody and that. But what it does also do is not highlight the victims like Johannesburg, where we are seeing a lot of people being kidnapped during hijackings, during armed robberies in their homes, in their businesses and such, which are held in order to circumvent the tracking device or to draw money. This is real trauma faced by many South Africans, especially in Gauteng. I mean, we're looking here at 46% of the kidnappings being the result of robbery. So it's really important that we help the police, that we check their websites for missing persons, and that we make sure that we work with them where possible in order to keep our people safe. Because, I mean, there's nothing more disturbing in Gauteng, especially 50% of all hijackings happen, to be eaten with your car, for instance. I mean, we all know of somebody that has happened to. I mean, the trauma is real. So we need police resources where it has go missing. You need to report it immediately, no waiting period, I think. I mean, it's very, very important. But I think guardians must just understand that the risk of young children especially are quite low. As long as you keep them in your care and so on, we mustn't use our energy to chase this, panic.
The other important issue here is the question of human trafficking, Lizette. Because I think this is where the biggest fear, the biggest concern is as far as human trafficking goes. And when these young children or young people are kidnapped, this is the biggest concern, that these people will never, ever be seen again and possibly shipped off somewhere into some unknown destination. And just how significant is the motive behind human trafficking?
So human trafficking is real, but the portions are quite low in terms of kidnapping cases. I mean, out of the analysis of 1,000 odd dockets, only 16 cases were identified as human trafficking cases. And here the motive, or the modus operandi as they call it, the method of kidnapping is often through, people are forced into labor. It's like a job. And if you come and work here, you'll get this and this, and then they're tricked into that job or into a life of sexual favors, So it does happen. It's been regulated under other type legislation, and there's a lot of work that's being done on that. But the chances of a small child being trafficked is fairly low. It's not. We're not saying the risk is zero. But
I think we have obviously lost Lizette Lancaster for some reason or the other. And once again, I think weather-wise, we are having some weather issues out here, and possibly there may have been a break in communication. But Lizette is back with us.
Yes, sorry about that. I don't know what the weather's got against us today.
Right. No, no problem. You were just, we were talking about this human trafficking and the motives, Lizette.
Yes, so I'm not sure how much you heard of that, but what we are saying is that if only 16% or 16 cases could be identified, 3,000 kidnappings, it shows that that type of crime is actually quite low. The risk is quite low. It's not proportionate to the fear and the panic we have.
I think the key issue here at the end of the day is, as Lizette Lancaster has mentioned, is not to rely on social media because it does create a lot of problems. It creates a lot of panic. And looking at the official statistics that has come through from the South African Police Services, and they've basically broken it down and they publish this information, particularly when it comes to missing cases, some dating back to 2014. And this is quite interesting. Of the 1,033 cases that have been listed, 83% were adults over the age of 18, 13% were between 10 and 18 years old, and 3.5% were under the age of 10. And as Lizette mentioned, the single biggest cause of kidnapping is related to armed robberies. And also sometimes when the hijackings, this is when they obviously take an adult or a child and they are taken to possibly draw some cash at ATMs, and also at the same time when we're looking at tracking devices that aren't activated. So there's a lot that we can actually read into the information that is being published by the South African Police Services. But the critical issue here at the end of the day is social media. We know it's always a buzz, but we need to be able to identify what is genuine and what is fake. The time is just gone 9 a.m. We're heading for the news. We'll be back.
Creator, you can't get enough. He is everywhere, and he knows we